Thank you for joining the Halal and Travel Global Summit hosted by Crescent Rating. Allow me to first introduce myself. I'm Reem El Shafaki. I'm partner at DinarStandard, a growth strategy and execution management firm. I lead the company's travel and tourism sector practice, as well as the firm's marketing strategy and execution projects. And I recently authored the Muslim-friendly travel chapter of the State of the Global Islamic Economy report, produced by DinarStandard and supported by Dubai Economy and Tourism. And I frequently speak at Muslim-friendly travel conferences, including ITB Berlin and the Global Islamic Economy Summit in Dubai. Now, a little about our session today. So the topic is Muslim women leaders in travel. And the objectives of the session is to share experiences and advice from our amazing panelists to Muslim women who aspire to be leaders in the travel industry. And the format is a very informal panel discussion and conversation. Now, first, let me begin by introducing our panelists. I'll start with Ms. Sumaira Isaacs. Sumaira is the CEO of the World Tourism Forum Institute. She has over 25 years of experience working within the tourism industry, supporting and developing some of the most prolific winning tourism destinations. Sumaira specializes in tourism, MICE development, destination strategy development, and action planning. She aims to not only sustainably expand the Global Tourism Forum platform to all continents, but also realize her personal dream to help elevate poverty and create jobs through tourism in the countries it serves. And next, I'd like to introduce Ms. Sarah Khan. Sarah is an award-winning travel journalist who has reported from 6 continents for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Condé Nast Traveler, Travel Plus Leisure, Bloomberg, Robert Report, and numerous other publications. And most recently was the editor-in-chief of Condé Nast Traveler Middle East. Sarah's work appears in the Best American Travel Writing 2021 and New York Times 36 Hours, 150 Cities from Abu Dhabi to Zurich. She's lived in 6 continents, 6 countries on 3 continents, and possesses 2.5 passports. Okay, we'll ask you about that later, Sarah. But let's dive into our discussion. And before we get into the serious questions, I wanted to ask you something. What's a fun fact, tourism related, if possible, about each of you that most people don't know? Maybe Sarah can tell us about the 2.5 passports or anything else that you'd like to share.
Yeah.
Sarah,
First of all, thank you so much for having us here. This is such a great panel to be a part of. And yeah, I think I like to drop in the 2.5 passports because it's a great conversation starter. Essentially, I was born in Canada, immigrated to the US, so I have Canadian and American passports. And the half passport is actually the Indian OCI, Overseas Citizen of India, which kind of gives you all the rights of citizenship except voting and things like that. So that would be my 0.5.
Interesting. Sumaira, how about you? A fun fact that most people don't know about you.
The fun fact, actually, thank you so much, Reem, first of all, for Crescent Rating to have us here. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting discussion. The fun fact that a lot of people don't know about me actually is not travel related, but I'm also an artist. I paint. And I'm a featured artist. I've owned art galleries and I hold exhibitions. That's
amazing. Is that one of your works behind you? We can't see it in full.
This particular work actually is a combination of my daughter and I painting together. It's like that.
Amazing, mashallah.
Yeah. But that's actually not my style. But you'll find me as Sumaira Isaacs on Instagram and all of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. Okay, now let's get into the more serious questions. And I'll start with the topic of women in leadership. So each of you is a successful female leader within the tourism industry in your own path. What leadership lessons have you learned in your career, and what tips would you provide women starting their careers in Muslim-friendly tourism? And Sumaira, if I can start with you, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Reem. It's sometimes very, I get asked this question so often, and sometimes it's very difficult to answer because it's just not one aspect. It's a multitude of things that have happened. And I think the leadership for me has happened not because of me, but because of the people in my life, who've impacted or who've nudged me along. And of course, that's always your family first, but it's also a lot of mentors and people you aspire towards unknowingly, and move forward. But one of the key lessons that I've learned, because not only as a leader, but as a leader who's been a mother, who's a mother as well, but because I started my career very early on in Dubai, and literally starting in the travel industry at the age of 16, studying and working in travel agencies as interns, and later on really embracing the field. That in my initial, when I became a mother, initial days, I would not even tell people that I'm a mother, because I didn't want people to, especially the men in the field, who to think that I'm weak, that or consider me weak, because those were the early days, and think that I am able to keep up with the pace of the industry, be able to get the opportunities to travel, to be invited to the trade shows. ITB was one of the trade shows, that I was going to for nearly 15 years every year, and so forth. And I think that all has changed, and it must change. So this is one of the key lessons I've learned over the years, is that we cannot hide who we are, and we are equal to men. And it's nothing to be ashamed of when you say that you have families, because having a family makes you a better manager. It helps to juggle your roles around. That's one key lesson. And the other one is that the ability to be able to walk away from a table. If you
Mm.
have respect, that you should be able to say no, enough, and be able to walk away. And I think that's been for me a key lesson over the years, because as women we take on so much, and we let others have their way with you, and we don't know where to put the say that, okay, no more.
Yeah, that's excellent advice, and especially in terms of saying, being able to say no, and the ability to walk away. And I think in terms of family, the past couple of years, with most of us having to work from home, and showing family in the background has been so normalized
Yeah.
for both women and even men.
Yeah.
And I feel that helps.
It's liberating.
Yeah,
It's
exactly, and helps employers and others know that women do have another life outside of
Yeah.
workspace. Sarah, what advice would you give, and what lessons have you learned throughout your career?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Sumaira, because especially that learning to say no and walking away, that's such powerful advice that I think only recently in my career have I really started to understand the importance of. And I think for me, I have been a journalist now for 18 years. And one of the perks of that is that I have carte blanche to be very nosy and curious and ask questions, because that's literally part of the job description. And I think that's something that I take to all aspects of my life, and especially in leadership capacities, because you have to ask questions and really listen to the answers. You need to listen to your team, listen to your community, listen to your clients, listen to everyone. And I think that's really one of the most important things for me, is actually asking all the questions, anything that comes to mind, and really being ready to listen and observe and understand what people are saying to you, and then incorporating that into your next steps. And as far as being in the Muslim travel space, Muslim-friendly tourism in particular, one of the things I do wherever I go in the world, whether it's Argentina or India or Uzbekistan or Mozambique, is I always go to mosques. And that's just something I've always done on a personal level because I'm very curious about how Islam is practiced around the world. And in those mosques, I'm typically in the women's section, obviously. And I think some of the camaraderie and kinship that I felt in those sections, even with insurmountable language barriers, is really meaningful. And I think it's made me realize that women really do hold the key to understanding communities and societies, and embracing these networks when we travel is really such an important key to success for anyone in tourism. And as women, we have special access to these communities, and because we're so welcomed and embraced. And I think really harnessing that sense wherever we go in the world really will go a long way for anyone who's trying to really understand this space.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Now, Sumaira, you mentioned mentors, and I wanted to ask both of you, do you have female leaders who inspire you, and can you explain who it is and why?
Well, I have, sorry, go ahead, Sumaira.
No, Sarah, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I think for me, one of the things that's most important to me in my career, especially in the media side of it, is just representation and visibility. And I think in the media landscape, in the lifestyle space, particularly where travel falls in, there's been a lot of Muslim women in recent years that have really come to the fore that are just very inspirational to me. Women like Nadia Hussain in the UK in the food and travel space, Ibtihaj Muhammad, who's in sports. In the US, we have a lot of really dynamic political leaders these days with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. So I just think seeing these women living their lives and doing what they're doing in all their different verticals and industries has been really, motivating in the last few years, especially.
Yes. So, Sumaira, are there any leaders in particular you'd like to mention?
So leaders, yes, but Muslim leaders, unfortunately, as my career was progressing, they were not a lot, But in fact, I think it's what Sarah said is correct, is about representation more than anything else, and I just found myself over and over again in that representation mode because I realized that I was a minority in the boardroom, in European boardrooms, in US boardrooms, because I was on the board of a lot of associations, still industry associations, as well as the organizations that I have served. And I felt that I was always in a minority because it was about demystifying the role of Muslim women, or how Muslim women should appear, because people would ask me questions like, oh, you're a Muslim, oh, but you don't cover, oh, how does your family allow you to travel? So it's demystifying a lot of perceptions that people hold, that all Muslim women cover, or Muslim women can't travel, and if they have families, they live in joint families only. And so it was always about fighting perceptions, So unfortunately, no, I did not have a lot of Muslim women as my career progressed, but I think Sarah is right. I got more inspired by political leaders, or political women leaders, and we had Benazir Bhutto in Pakistan, that's where originally I am from, and a lot of Indonesian and Bangladeshi leaders, and in India, and I think that inspired me. Today, if you see in Africa, that a majority of the Africa, a lot of African countries where the tourism ministers are Muslim leaders, and I find that fascinating, that in a continent like Africa, which is considered so much behind the rest of the world, and there you will find more and more tourism ministers who are women, and I've brushed shoulders with a few of them, and it's inspiring.
Yes, that's very true. And I believe both of you are an inspiration for upcoming women leaders who want to look up and find role models.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I wanted to ask, so the past 2 years have been challenging for the tourism industry, and that's an understatement. So how can women leaders collaborate to strengthen the Muslim-friendly travel industry and support each other during difficult times in general? Sarah, perhaps we start with you.
Well, I think obviously at all times, for me, I come from a journalism and media background, and so I am very, very passionate about the importance of content to champion and promote tourism and to share narratives both of travelers who are out there exploring the world, but also the people on the ground in these communities that are making these destinations so special. And I think now more than ever, we really need to be getting these stories out there so people, as they start navigating the world again, that they know what they're seeing, who's there, who are the key stakeholders that they really need to interact with. And then I think just from, like I said, diversity in travel is very, very important to me, and making sure that the content that we're seeing, whether it's written media, whether it's digital, whether it's video, is actually reflecting the way we travel today and is actually servicing the needs of travelers today. And in particular, for us in this conversation we're having, women travelers, women Muslim travelers who are actually have their own needs and their own interests. And are we actually creating information that is really serving them and is showing them the world that they need to see and that they need to be exploring? So I think that's something that at all times that's very important. But I think now, as we're getting back out in the world, just sharing these stories is more important than ever before.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's a very important role that you play as a journalist, communicating these stories.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of women leadership, I believe women lead differently than men. And I'm not sure if you both agree, but would the travel industry change if there were more women leaders? And how would it change? Sumaira, if I could direct that question to you.
I think the industry is changing. In a lot of ways, our industry is behind where technology is concerned. So technology itself, I think the COVID has fast-tracked the development of the industry. From the last 15 years of pace has been all brought together in just a couple of years. You can see the touch points of technology all across through VR, AI, blockchain. All of this is changing the way we do business. So obviously, it's redefining. Like how Sarah has said, it's really important to have diversity in the industry today. This is very important, and I think we are becoming more bold. Technology is making us more bold. The fact that we are today here on this platform is we are more connected, more accessible, and we are not shy anymore. And I was talking to a small women's summit here in Toronto 10 days ago, and it was amazing to see all these young women who are joining the industry, who want to aspire towards, because I think they feel that they have more access into the industry. So that connectivity absolutely is essential, but it's also essential that more and more leaders like ourselves make ourselves accessible as well to young leaders, to young aspiring people who want to come, or women who want to come into the industry, not just women, but men, young men as well. Give them the opportunities that the industry gave you. Give them, and make it easier. Although for us, at least on my level, there was a lot of struggle. So I don't think so that it should be that difficult anymore. It's becoming more and more easy. There's a lot of content, like how we are talking about content here online. People can educate themselves. There's online free courses available if you can't afford to educate yourself through colleges. But a lot of universities and colleges are offering programs which were not offered, let's say, a decade ago. So all of these are opportunities that are available to take on.
Absolutely. And also sessions such as these, the Halal and Travel Global Summit sessions and others, there's so much wealth of information and educational material that's out there. I totally agree. So let me move on to another topic that I believe both of you are passionate about, which is responsible tourism. And I, but in general, responsible tourism is one topic. But what issues are each of you advocating for in the Muslim travel space as well as within the tourism space in general? And Sarah, if we can start with you.
Well, I think we've all seen more than ever before in the last 2 years how connected the world is and how much of an impact tourism has on different communities. So first we were dealing with, until 2019, the buzzword was over tourism and how can we prevent that and what that's doing to communities. And now we've obviously gone in the complete other direction, and we're actually realizing how dependent so many people in the world beyond the obvious key stakeholders in these different industries are, like, how the roll-on effect that tourism has throughout communities that have been now suffering for the last 2 years. So I think the biggest thing that everybody should be focused on is creating more sustainable tourism initiatives that actually are more focused on the community, that aren't so driven from, like, the center the community first and their needs and how they can celebrate what they have and what they can share with the world, and less consumptive from the tourist standpoint. Because I think until 2020, it was all very much, people coming in and out of different destinations, bucket listing, taking, and not really focusing on the communities and their needs. And so I think now, hopefully, this is leading a charge toward more meaningful and thoughtful travel. And then while we do that, we can kind of see how our tourism dollars really impact the communities we're going to and how that can be done in a more responsible way. And then how we can build these sustainable networks that aren't so dependent on these, in and out travelers.
Yes.
Sumaira, what are some of the issues you're advocating for?
So I am. We are taking it a step further than responsible tourism. There is something that we are really touching upon is the meaningful tourism. So there is a need for a paradigm shift developed long. It's been developed long before COVID-19 crippled the industry, because. The very success of international tourism, with 5 times the numbers of trips in 2019 compared to the year 1980, it has made a mockery of the idea of hospitality and has in many places run a juggernaut over local nature, local culture, diversity, and serendipity, negatively impacting satisfaction levels of all stakeholders involved. So over-tourism was the main discussion item in 2019, and climate change, decreasing biodiversity, and rising inequality of distribution of wealth and problems. So meaningful tourism can be one of the ways to reimagine tourism. It is a concept that we developed internally. So meaningful tourism refers to a post-pandemic development of global tourism. It's advancing the existing concept of sustainable and responsible tourism. It changes the predominantly supply side and often the negative perspective of sustainable tourism and responsible tourism towards more a demand side and a more balanced perspective, promoting tourism which is meaningful for all stakeholders involved. And I can go on and on about it, and if you'll just bear with me. So for tourists to get new experience and to increase their knowledge about themselves, for host communities to have more influence on tourism development, and and to benefit instead of suffering from the visitors, for the staff in the tourism and hospitality service providers to offer full-time career jobs, good quality services, and meaningful activities, for governments to gain employment opportunities for their citizens, and for the environment, where all stakeholders to be careful and more interested, causing no, or at least at least less damage locally, and to push for non-polluting forms of mobility. So that's what has been the shift for us, and we've been pushing for.
And I believe there's a lot of synergy between the teachings of Islam and what our deen tells us about caring about the earth and caring about each other and communities that we visit. And there's so much in terms of responsible and meaningful tourism. But do you think Muslim travelers are there? I know there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of lip service towards responsible and eco-friendly tourism, and we talk about that a lot even within Muslim-friendly tourism. But what's your perception of where travelers are in terms of desiring to do more for the communities that they visit, willing to pay extra for a trip that is more meaningful and more responsible?
I think that we are at an interesting point right now because, like we were saying, for the last 2 years, a lot of people have been living the sedentary life and really reflecting on their choices and what they want to do next. So I think where people might have been more inclined to just go in and out or like try to do as many places as possible, I think now people are more looking for these meaningful experiences, whatever that might look like. And so I think that's where they turn to people like us who are in the media and to just different travel industry experts to really help guide them. And I think this is an interesting time where people need that guidance because they are curious about how they can explore the world and what impact they can have. And they really are looking for ways to travel differently. And that's where it comes on people like us to really help show who are the communities that they can be helping, who are the key people that they should be watching, and how they can really travel more meaningfully as they do navigate the world again.
That's true. And in your work, Sarah, I feel you're an influencer in terms of the stories that you choose to cover and that you choose to highlight. So, and encouraging people to travel more meaningfully and highlighting these stories, I feel that goes a long way.
Yeah, and like what you were saying about just how I think it is a fundamental element of the deen to really focus on community. And I think that is the way forward, is seeing, like, really diving into the communities and understanding who the key people are in these different communities and what they're bringing to the table, whether it's championing, artisans or creatives or, just really diving in and getting to know people on a one-to-one basis, as opposed to before you might have just gone with the tour and just kind of done it on a more superficial level. Whereas I think kind of really embracing those tenets will help us move forward more thoughtfully.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Several studies that have been done are saying that younger travelers are more into immersive experiences and want that immersive experience with the community that they're visiting and want more of an experiential. But I agree. I feel COVID has made all of us want to really travel more meaningfully and stay longer. I actually last year I spent a 2-month workation in Turkey.
Oh, wow.
Which was amazing, and it spending that long of a time allowed us as a family to really get to know locals and to interact with them and have meals with them, and that was so much meaningful than just visiting and having a quick tour and just flying back.
And I think that's something that is also something we haven't really touched on, but one of these big trends that's emerged from the pandemic is this remote work option that many people didn't have before. So before, if you were going to relocate, you were usually a 20-something backpacker who moves off to Indonesia and does their digital nomad situation or, blogging or whatever. Whereas now you can actually have your professional 9-to-5 job that you were having in New York or London and actually relocate somewhere else with your entire family, with your children doing remote work. And that's letting people connect with each other in a different location and also really meaningfully connect with the destination. And I think the one thing most of us have probably missed in the last 2 years has been human connection. And I think that's what people are really craving more than ever, and going to these countries and really having those connections.
And you're so right, Sarah, because it also helps to develop tolerance and acceptance, which is such a huge pillar of Islam, because until and unless you really fully immersed in these communities, you don't really see the commonalities and the threads, between them. And that's just not between Muslim communities, Muslim to Muslim, but Muslim to Jewish, Muslim to Christians. You and I both come from Canada, and Canada is all about diversity, and all faiths are so free to practice, what their beliefs are. And when you're living so close by, shoulder to shoulder, and you end up traveling together as well, you see the common threads between these communities. So that immersive whole immersive experience. Reem, that's quite enlightening that that you travel with the family.
It was very enriching and for the whole family. And I feel being here in the US, sometimes your children are in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great, even when we go back home to Egypt. I'm originally from Egypt, seeing people who are less fortunate, who we may not necessarily get to experience here in the US. So it's definitely it's a benefit to children to allow them that experience. Sarah, you touched about on trends, and actually that was my next question. Was about we're seeing so many trends that are happening in an accelerated pace due to the pandemic, rapid digitization, and as you, Sumaira, mentioned as well. What do female leaders of tomorrow need to do to be prepared for the trends of the future, and both in terms of challenging trends as well as opportunities that these trends may bring about?
Well, I think we've seen that we cannot predict anything. I think that's what we've all learned. You just sort of need to give up control sometimes and just see what happens. And I think the biggest skill that you can develop is really just to be nimble and dynamic. And I think that's all we can really hope to do for better opportunities or for negative things that come our way. I mean, we keep hearing about monkeypox now, so who knows what's next, right? And so all you can do is really just develop those reflexes and understand that things can change in the blink of an eye for better or for worse, and that we just need to be prepared to ride those waves and just learn what we can do. And I think it's been really interesting because a lot of, the longer reaching trends, there's a lot of research that comes out of it. There's time to really sit with different, reports and understand to pave the way forward. And right now we're living in it. There's no time to wait for research and to wait for stats. You just kind of have to learn to navigate what's coming.
And it's interesting that we saw throughout the past 2 years, companies who were in travel and tourism, who were quick to pivot
mm-hmm.
and in order to keep revenue streams coming. And several companies pivoted into grocery deliveries, for example,
mm-hmm.
or other services that they can serve local communities and their local customers. And it's important to have that flexibility, like you said, and be able to be nimble and move on.
And I think I think the pivot is probably like the most hated word of the last 2 years, but I think it's really one of the most important ones. And I think the best way to really navigate that is by creating these sustainable systems that can kind of weather all these different storms, and that, are more focused on communities rather than tourists. And then that'll just lead the way forward.
Absolutely. So Sumaira, in terms of trends, what trends are you seeing, and how can female leaders of tomorrow, or leaders in general, or people in tourism in general, be prepared for the trends of the future, and both in terms of challenges and opportunities?
So one of the trends, of course, which we are really following very closely is the advancement in technology. I think that the technology today is going to lead, and any organization that does not embrace that in travel and tourism industry will get left behind. And we just recently had our conference in Dubai in February, which was on blockchain in travel, where we launched the first Ariba crypto travel coin. Okay, and a lot of people said to us that how are you embracing this? It's so controversial, and you as an organization, how can you be so open about it? And our thing was that, look, cryptocurrencies, it's a trend. Good or bad, time is going to tell. But as leaders, we cannot be standing on the sideline and let the trend come and go. We need to have conversations. We need to educate. We need to have a dialogue about it. So we are very proud that we sort of embrace the trend. We actually helped the first travel coin of the industry to launch in Dubai earlier on. And we brought in the Blockchain Association from Europe, all the stakeholders from the region, and for them to have an open conversation about this trend. So I think that these crypto wallets are here to stay. And it was interesting that even some of the bigger hotel chains are still not prepared for this trend. So but following our conference, we are proud to say now that some of the bigger and some small hotel chains in Dubai have actually asked us for the crypto machines and scanners just as pilots to see that what the response is going to be, because we have to be prepared for the new Gen Z, these travelers, because they don't have bank accounts, they don't own credit cards, and this is something accessible to them. So it's like, I believe it's like when internet was coming, there were a lot of skeptics who were saying that this trend is not going to last, and look where we are today. So yes, I think that's an important trend.
That's excellent. That you're putting your money where your mouth is, literally.
Yeah. And it's also a great example of just being, like I said, kind of fast on your feet, where they're not waiting for reports and results and like to wait and watch. Like they're just diving right in and, seeing where it goes.
So one last question before we close. As women in this travel field and as Muslim women, what can travel brands do better to address the needs of women travelers, especially Muslim female travelers? Sarah?
So as we've talked about a lot, my focus and passion is content and journalism and media. And I think, we hear a lot about the numbers, about how big the Muslim travel spend is. And I think we really just need to have both media outlets and brands doing a much better job of bringing in, like creating content that really caters to this audience. Like, that there's a lot of money to be spent, so now help us spend it, right? And so whether that is creating more diverse content, showcasing these different travelers, the way they travel, like I've been saying, I think that's really important. Muslim women in particular, but everybody needs to see themselves reflected in the brands that they patronize and in the media outlets that they read. So I think that is probably the biggest thing, because both media outlets need to be doing a better job of this, but then brands have been leading the way into content marketing for the last several years. So how do they do that really authentically, and not just to cater to the money, but also to really help us? Like, travel media is a service at the end of the day. We need to be able to serve the readers and the consumers and help them really find the way forward as they navigate the world.
Absolutely. Very well said, Sarah. Sumaira, from your perspective, what do you feel travel brands need to do better?
I think travel brands I keep going back to technology. They need to adapt to technology. They need to embrace technology. They need to educate their not just their employees, but also their stakeholders, their consumers, and not be afraid of technology. You cannot operate like you can be a small brand, but you should not have a mom and pop mentality anymore. And this is really, really essential. And other than that, it's all about educate, and educate your communities, your stakeholders, as well as yourself constantly, of the new trends, what is happening, and create awareness. And I think the travel and tourism is in for a boom now. There's a lot of pent-up demand, and we are seeing that all across the board. But also be prepared. Okay, be prepared, because I feel that after COVID, people have very short memories. They are forgetting about COVID, but COVID is still here. I've just had an aunt who has returned from Umrah, and she's vaccinated 3 times, but she's got COVID now. and this is she was performing Umrah for 8-9 days, and she's just come back to Dubai, and she's really really weak, and so that means COVID is still there. We've got monkeypox now coming up, so these kind of ailments and illnesses are not going away. So we need to not just educate ourselves about technology, but also about healthcare. Be more vigilant, pay attention to ourselves, and not take our health for granted.
Good advice. Thank you, Sumaira. Now, in closing, can each of you share one word or a brief sentence that sums up what you want to see in halal travel or in Muslim-friendly travel in the next 5 years? Sumaira.
I think halal tourism is a fairly new term. Not a lot of people are still aware of it. I think organizations like yourself, and even ours, have to talk about it more and educate. That it's a very important tourism segment, and destinations that are going to embrace this segment. They have a winner all along, and you can make money out of this segment. It's a high network individuals who are in this segment, and it's not something to be afraid of or shy of, but really to embrace this segment.
So educate. And Sarah, what's your word or brief sentence to summarize?
2 words, which I'll elaborate on. Local perspectives. I think something that I've always tried to do with my travel writing was really center local voices and, interview as many local experts and personalities as possible. And I think as that applies to our conversation, it's about really centering the local businesses, the local personalities in these destinations and what they're doing, and making sure our tourism dollars are going to the right place.
Thank you so much. You were both very, very interesting to listen to. Your answers, you're very experienced, and thank you for sharing your perspectives. And thank you to the audience for joining the session at the Halal in Travel Global Summit. And do check out the other interesting sessions that we have as well.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, Reem.
You're welcome. Take care. It was really a pleasure, and I do hope we stay in touch. It was really a pleasure speaking to you both.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.